Namaste Priya Mitrani. Yushmakam Dhatunam Adhyanam Purna Vegena Agre Chalati iti Mama Purna Vishwasaha Asti. So, Namaste dear friends, I'm confident that your practice of the verbs is going on at full swing. So, and I hope that the tempo is high, because at KGP, at Kharagpur, the slogan for the community is KGP ka tempo high hai. So we all are pepped up when we say that. So I hope Sanskrit ka tempo is also high. The tempo of Sanskrit is high. So with that, let's move on to today's lecture, which is lecture number 30, and it's going to be an introduction to the conjugation of the verbs div, which mean to shine, and also to sport, and vid, to know, from the Divadi Gana, which is the fourth group. So, going to do an introduction to this fourth group, the Divadi Gana, in all the tenses that we've been looking at for the last few sessions. But one new thing that I'm going to do today is to introduce you to the Atmanepadi. So, we've been looking at the verb conjugations in the Parasmaipadi generally, but I had also talked to you about this alternative way of conjugating verbs, which is the Atmanepadi. So, I'm going to introduce you to that while looking at the verbs div and vid. Alright, and of course there will be a building of your vocabulary in the process. So let's look at the verb div in the Parasmaipadi. So divyati. So the reason why you're seeing an empty table there is because divyati conjugates just like bhuadi gana or churadi gana. So it's like the first group. While the verb is div, the root form, the conjugation is divyati. Okay, so divyati, divyataha, divyanti, divyasi, divyathaha, divyatha, divyami, divyavaha, divyamaha. So I'll just write one there so that you know how you can fill it up. So divyataha, etc., etc. Alright, so I'd like you to pause here and see if you can fill it up for yourselves. What happens to the Bhavishya Kala? Devishyati, Devishyataha, Devishyanti, Devishyasi, Devishyathaha, Devishyatha, Devishyami, Devishyavaha, Devishyamaha. And I just wanted to also mention that the verb root div, which means to shine, is also the same root for the words deva and the English divine, which means the shining or the illuminated beings of light. And there's a lot around that, but we'll keep that for another time. For now, I'd just like you to also notice some other verbs from that group. So we have nrit, which is nrityati, and nartishyati, sham, shamyati, and shamishyati, muh, muhyati, and mohishyati. And like we've been doing in all the other cases, what is the characteristic of this particular group? So what do you see in common in the conjugation of the third person in the present tense in the singular? What do you see in common? Nrityati, shamyati, muhyati, divyati. Yeah, it's the year thing that comes in there. So if you have verbs that have a year coming in like that, there's a good chance that it might belong to the fourth group. With these words, let's look at the tables. This is what I've typically done. I will have a blank table for you, and then with just a hint, and then I will show you the full one. So you can practice looking at this, and now you can guess what's coming next. So the Ajna and the Anadyatana Bhuta, and also the Kriyati Patilring as a consequence. So we have here Divyatu. So Divyatu, Divyatam, Divyatam. Okay, and let's do that for you again. Divyatam and Divyantu. Alright, and then you can fill up the rest. So Divyatu, Divyatam, Divyantu, Divya, Divyatam, Divyata, Divyani, Divyava, Divyama. And what happens to the Bhutakala? Adivyat, Adivyatam, Adivyan, Adivyaha, Adivyatam, Adivyata, Adivyam, Adivyava, and Adivyama. Uttamam. So what I'd like you to do also is to try and do this by yourself, and then look at the full form as you have in the table there. But at the same time, I want you to make one sentence saying that let him or let her dance. So let her dance. What would it be? nrityatu. Sa nrityatu, but you don't need to say all of it. Sa nrityatu is enough. Alright. So I just picked up the word from there, from the table there. Let's move on. So here we have the Bhutakala, the Anadyatana Bhuta and the Vidhiling, because we've seen that they are similar in the Parasmaipadi. So what do we have here? Adivyat, what does it become? Divyet. Okay, so it's the yat, vyat becomes vyet. So adivyatam becomes divyetam. Uttamam. Adivyan, divye, not divyeyan, divyan, no. So this becomes different, so it is divyeyuhu. Alright, then adivyaha will become divyehe, then divyatam becomes divyetam, divyata, divyeta. Adivyam becomes divyeyam, divyava becomes divyeva, and divyama becomes divyema. Alright, so you have the similarity there, and you have the table here to fill in, to check whether what you had filled in was correct or not. Let's move on. I just wanted to also show you a comparison between the Bhuadi Gana and the Divadi Gana here. So we have Divyet and Bhavet, Divyetam Bhavetam, Divyeyuhu Bhaveyuhu, Divyehe Bhavehe, Divyetam Bhavetam, Divyeta Bhaveta, Divyeyam Bhaveyam, Divyeva Bhaveva, and Divyema is Bhavema. Uttamam. So I'd also like you to notice this similarity that exists between these two, because we were looking also at some verbs that had the yat, right? You know, so kuryat for example, but that's something that we will also see in greater detail later on. So moving on, and this is the real topic of today's lecture, which is the Atmanepadi. And so in each of these groups you have Parasmaipadi forms as well as Atmanepadi. So let's look at what the Atmanepadi does in the Vartamana Kala and the Bhavishya Kala. So here we have vid, the verb vid becomes vidyate. So vid means to be. So vid is the root verb for the word Veda, and it can mean three things really. So vid means to be, vid means to obtain, and vid also means to know, but they might behave differently in terms of the conjugations, but vid in itself means to know. So vidyat and to be. Alright, so very interestingly the word Veda would then mean that knowledge to be obtained in order to be. Okay, so Veda is that knowledge to be obtained in order to be. Three vids that fit into that particular sense. Now, so vidyate, vidyete, vidyante. Can you repeat after me? Vidyate, vidyete, vidyante, vidyase, vidyethe, vidyadhve. Completely new sound. Vidye, vidyavahe, vidyamahe. So if you want to say that I am in my house, how would you say that? I am in my house, using the verb vid. So aham vidye, kutra vidye, mama grihe. So aham mama grihe or swagrihe vidye. Uttamam. Let's move on to the Bhavishya Kala. What do you say? Vidyate becomes vetsyate, vetsyete, vetsyante. So vidyete becomes vetsyete. We've always found this similarity between the Vartamana and the Bhavishya Kala, and you find that also reflected in the Atmanepadi. So vetsyate, vetsyete, vetsyante, vetsyase, vetsyethe, vetsyadhve, vetsye, vetsyavahe, vetsyamahe. So vedi normally here becomes seer. So ved, with plus with plus the seer of the Bhavishya become vetsyate. Astu. So I hope you've got that, but I'd also like to add here that while I am introducing you to the Atmanepadi in a few lessons also that will follow, what is important is for the exams you will only really get anything connected to the Vartamana Kala, because everything else is if Vartamana and the Bhavishya Kala at the most, you will not really get anything more than that. But I am presenting these to you so that for those of you who are interested to know more would have access to that information. And one last thing I wanted to add is that don't feel overburdened, just do as much as is comfortable for you, and try and get the feel of it. Say it, say it, say it. That's the easiest way. Adhikam vadantu, uchchaihi pathantu. Tena bahu labha bhavishyati. Speak aloud and you'll be greatly benefited by that. Now there are another few verbs which are very interesting here. So jan, the word for janma, birth, is jayate, means this is born. And then janishyate means which will be born. Man, manyate means one who considers. Man from mind, man, all the same roots. Mansyate, will consider. Li, li means to become one, to merge. Okay, liyate means to become merge in a sense. So liyate and leshyate or lasyate. Astu. So let's move on. We have vidyate here. Yeah, so this I wanted to also put side by side for you to see the difference between the Parasmaipadi, the Atmanepadi and the Parasmaipadi. So we have Vidyate and it is Divyati. Vidyate Divyataha, Vidyante Divyanti, Vidyase Divyasi. So you see what is common there. Vidyethe Divyathaha, Vidyadhve Divyatha. Vidye, Divyami, completely different. Vidyavahe, Vidyavaha. So you have the Vaha that is there. Vidyamahe and Divyamaha. Okay, so just one thing more about the Atmanepada and the Atmanepadi and Parasmaipadi verbs. The Atmanepadi tends to be more actions directed towards oneself, whereas the Parasmaipadi, as the word says, is a more outward directed action. So let's look at the Ajna here and the Anadyatana Bhuta and the Kriyatipatil ring that will follow. So Vidyatam, Vidyetam, Vidyantam. Okay. Yeah, so I'll say it and you can repeat after me once. Vidyaswa, Vidyetham, Vidyadhvam. Vidyai, Vidyavahai, Vidyamahai. Uttamam. Do you remember any mantra that we had learned? Sahaviryam Karavavahai. So although it's the root kr, but it behaves like it has the Atmanepadi form there, because it's saying Karavavahai, let us do that. And because it is not just let us, it's directed towards oneself and therefore that particular form. And then we have in the Bhutakala we have Avidyata, Avidyetam, Avidyanta. Repeat that. Avidyathaha, Avidyetham, Avidyadhvam. Avidye, Avidyavahi, Avidyamahi. Alright, so Hai for the Ajna and Hi for the Bhutakala. And of course here you have with the Jan, it becomes Jayatam and then Ajayata and Ajanishyata. So not Ajanishyat, because that is the Parasmaipadi and Jan is an Atmanepadi verb. So Man, Manyatam, Amanyata and Amansyata. We would have thought if Li, Liyatam, Aliyat, Aliyata and Aleshyata and Alasyata. Uttamam. So we come to the Bhutakala and the Vidhiling side by side. We've already done the Bhutakala, so I'll move on to the Vidhiling here. We have Vidyeta, Vidyeyatam. Okay, Vidyeran. So these are quite different. Alright, next Vidyethaha, Vidyeyatham. Once you have that, then you can expect something similar to follow. And then Vidyedhvam. Next Vidyeya, Vidyevahi, Vidyemahi. Uttamam. And you have the verbs there as well. So let's move on. I wanted here, so Jan, what would happen to Jan in the Vidhiling? So Jan becomes Jayeta. Okay, so that will be Jayeta. Man, Manyeta. Uttamam. And what happens to Li? Liyata or Liyeta. Uttamam. Let's move on now. So a comparative there between the Bhutakala and the Vidhiling, a closer comparison for you to see. I'll not spell it out for you, but I'd like you to just look at that carefully. Let's do a Sambhashanam with Piyush, a quick one to try and apply what we have done. Hari Om Piyusha.
Namaste Arya.
Durga Puja kada vidyate?
आगामिनी सप्ताहे दुर्गा पूजा विद्यते अहम मन्ये.
तत्र किं किं वेत्स्यते भविष्यति वा?
तत्र विभिन्न कार्यक्रमाः विद्यन्ते. केचन जनाः नृत्यन्ति, केचन ज्येष्ठाः चण्डीपाठं श्रुत्वा मुह्यन्ति
आम् देव्याः महिमां दृष्ट्वा सर्वे जनाः तत्र मुह्यन्ति एव
आम्
भवान् अपि तत्र नर्तयिष्यति किम्
न अहं शैशवे अनृत्यम् इदानीम् अहं न नृत्यामि
अस्तु अस्मिन् अवसरे सर्वेषां बहवः अविस्मरणीयाः अनुभवः जायेरन् नैव
आं सत्यं यदा आश्विनमासे दुर्गादेवी आयाति तदा वङ्गप्रदेशस्य सर्वे जनाः तस्यां लीयन्ते एव
उत्तमं युष्माकं सर्वेषाम् उत्तमः महोत्सवः भवतु इति प्रार्थयावः Now, these are two mantras and a shloka that reflect a little bit of what we have studied. So it says, Na jayate, we just did that. Na jayate, jan root. Na jayate, mriyate, va vipaschin. Nayam kutaschin, na babhuva kaschit. Ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Very famous verse, and where do we find this verse? Usually in the Gita, and it is in this form. Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Very famous verse from the second chapter of the Gita, where Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna what is trying to talk to him about the immortality of the soul, and he says, you know, what you think you're killing really cannot be killed, because that which is the essence of the individual is immortal. And the blue is to indicate to you the differences, and the differences where. So the source verse or the source mantra of this Gita shloka is in the Upanishads, okay, the Kathopanishad to be more precise. And in the Kathopanishad it is said, the wise one is not born, neither does he die. He came not from anywhere, neither is he anyone. He is unborn, he is everlasting. He is ancient and sempiternal. He is not slain in the slaying of the body. And the Gita says, this is not born, nor does it die, nor is it a thing that comes into being once the passing away will never come into being again. It is unborn, ancient, sempiternal. It is not slain with the slaying of the body. And let's just do the, let's just look at the verse once. Let's do a meaning here. Na jayate mriyate va vipaschin. So here you have a break there. Nayam kutaschin na. So again there is kutaschin na babhuva kaschit. Ajo nityaha is ajaha plus nityaha. Okay, ajaha plus nitya. And then shashvatoyam, we know that shashvataha plus ayam. Purano is puranaha. I'll do it here for you. Puranaha. And then nahanyate hanyamane sharire. And what happens when we do it in the Gita shloka here? Najayate mriyate va kadachin. Kadachin is there. Nayam bhutva. So kadachin is actually kadachit plus na. Na bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah. Ajo, again ajaha. Nityaha shashvatoyam taha ayam. Purano puranaha. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Alright, so I'd like you to say that after me. Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit. Nayam kutaschin na babhuva kaschit. Ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. And in the Gita, na jayate mriyate va kadachin. Nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah. Ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Very, very lofty ideas here, a lot of contemplation on these verses. A lot of contemplation also is not enough. It's only realization that will liberate us and give us a deeper understanding of this. I thought there was a very interesting fact I came across about the Kathopanishad. It says a verse in the Upanishad inspired the title and the epigraph of W. Somerset Maugham's 1944 novel The Razor's Edge, later adapted twice into films of the same title in 1946 and 1984. The epigraph reads, "The sharp edge of a razor is difficult to pass over. Thus the wise say, the path to salvation is hard." Taken from a verse in the Kathopanishad. And Maughan had visited India in 1938 and met Ramana Maharshi at his ashram in Tamil Nadu. And I thought finally this quote from the Vande Mataram library, which is an excellent resource of the entire Gita and also of some Upanishads based on Sri Aurobindo's interpretation. So it says, "Scripture and their word, Shabda Brahman, the oral expression of God, are guiding light in our existence on the material planes of life to illumine our path to knowledge and experience. They are constituted of the three elements of the word, the meaning and the spirit. In the original epoch of the Vedas and Upanishads, thought was preceded by intuition and illumination to confirm experience and realization, and not by the modern method of logical reasoning to attain logical conviction. Intellectual means are not sufficient for inquiry into works of Shruti or revelation, as they fail to perceive what the Shruti carries with it in its very words, a certain prakasha, a certain illumination. Rather, it is quite easy even to misinterpret a modern form of a statement that has come from the depths of the profundities of the spirit." So it was a lot there. Take your time to read it by yourself as well. References. So Viryamastute, this entire path, the grammar, the life itself is this razor's edge. Ataha kshurasya dhara is what they say. Okay, that it is like that razor's edge. Ataha shubhamastu and viryamastu.